Again, welcome to Mathematical Structure for Computer Science. This is CS113 at Pace University, also known as Discrete Mathematics. In these lectures, we will go through graphs and also graph models. Graph is one of the important data structure in computer science. A data structure means how data is organized in a computer system or computer application. So our main objective in these lectures is to go through the basic concept of graphs, introduction to graphs, and also the graph models. So first we start with the definition, but let's look at the diagram here. Again, this is a graph. A graph consists of a vertex and edge. The vertex is the blue circles, or we also use the term node, a vertex or node. Now the edge is a line. So in order to have an edge, we need two vertices. So a graph consists of two things, the vertices or nodes, and the edge to connect two or more vertices. Again, we have different types of graphs, and we shall go through each of them. So by the definition here, we say a graph G, which normally consists of V stand for the vertex and E stand for the edge, of a non-empty set. So a graph consists of non-empty set of V. So at least in a graph, we should have one vertex. If there's no vertex at all, then we don't have anything. So that's why the definition said a graph consists of non-empty set of V, of vertices, or we use the term nodes, and also a set E of edges. Each edge has either one or two vertices associated with it, which we call the endpoints. Now, when a edge have only one vertex, then we're going to have what we call the loop. So here we can see that an edge starts from A and goes to B. And it can also start from B and goes to A. So this is undirected graph. Normally, we have a directed graph. A directed graph means we will see the arrow where it's coming from and going to. So let's say we have arrow pointing from A to B, means we are going from A to B. We cannot go B to A. And we shall cover this in a few slides to come. So here we just want to understand what is a graph. In a basic form, we say a graph consists of two things. The vertices, which is the blue circles, and also the edge, which is the line that connects the vertices or nodes. So here we say each edge has either one or two vertices associated with it, called its endpoint. So an edge is said to connect its endpoints. Now there are some few remarks here we should know. First, we said that the graphs we study here are unrelated to graphs of functions studied in Unit 2. So we know in college algebra or mathematics, we have graphs. We can have a straight line graph, we can have a polynomial, or we can have, so there are so many nonlinear graphs, etc. So the graphs we study in mathematics or college algebra is different from the graphs here. In college algebra, we may have X and Y values, and we may plot a graph on a plane. It's different. Here, the graph we study here is how data is organized, especially in computer applications. So here we say we have a lot of freedom when we draw a picture of a graph. All that matters is the connection made by the edges. Okay, the edges is the line that connects two or more vertices, not the particular geometry depicted. So for example, the length of edges, whether the edges cross, how the vertices are shown, and so on, do not matter. So a graph with an infinity vertex is called an infinity graph, and also a graph with finite vertex set is called a finite graph. So the most important remarks here is that we should know the graph of college algebra is not the same as the graph we are studying here. So there are some few terminology here. Here we say that in a simple graph, each edge connects two different vertices, as we said earlier. Again, the edge is the line, and the end of the line connect vertex. So when you have one edge to connect two vertices at each end. And also a multigraph may have multiple edges connecting the same two vertices. So example, from A to C or C to A, we have again multigraphs. We have two edges connected to the same two vertices. You say a multigraph may have multiple edges connecting what the same two vertices. Also, an edge that connects a vertex to itself is called a loop. So in vertex B, we have a loop. So I may have only one vertex. I can still have an edge if only the edge will connect to the same, start from the same vertex and end at the same vertex. Then we call it a loop. Also, a pseudograph, which is another type of graph. But a pseudograph means a graph that includes the loops as well as multiple edges connecting the same pair of vertices. So the example diagram we have here is a pseudograph, because first it consists of a loop, and secondly, it consists of multi-edges connecting the same two vertices. So a pseudograph may include loops as well as multiple edges connecting the same pair of vertices. So this is again a pseudograph or pseudograph. So now we'll go through the two main type of graphs. We have the directed graphs and undirected. So the directed graph normally again consists of vertices and edges, but we have to show the direction where the edges is connecting. So here we say directed graph or digraph, which have vertices and edges, consists of non-empty set V of vertices or holes, and also a set E of directed edges. And the reason why it's called directed graph, because the edges, the line, show the direction that is going from one vertex to another. So each edge is associated with an ordered pair of vertices. The directed edge also associated with the other pair, UV, is said to start at U and end at V. Very important. Undirected graph, we can start from V and we end at U, or U we end at V. But directed graph have its direction. So we say graph where the endpoint of edge are not ordered are said to be undirected graph. So the undirected graph, we don't care about the direction. So let's see an example. So the first example here, we have a simple directed graph. There's no loop. So we can see when I'm at A, vertex A or node A, I can go to C because I can see the direction C. Or I can go also B. But when I'm in node B, I cannot go to A. If I'm in node B, I can go to C. And if I'm at C, also node C, I can go to B, the direction. So this is an example of a directed graph with 3 vertices and 4 edges. So here also we said that a directed multigraph, remember multigraph we said when we have more than 2 edges connecting the same, more than 1 edges connecting the same 2 vertices. So here we even have a multigraph. We are connecting A, B to C, C to B. So we have a multiple edges. So a directed multigraph may have multiple directed edges. When there are m directed edges from the vertex U to the vertex V, we say that UV again, U represent the vertex and V represent the edge. It's an edge of multiplicity M. So we can see this diagram. We have a multiplicity of A and B. A, we have 3, direction B, 5. Actually, we call that the degree. The degree of A is how many lines connect to it, which is 3. The degree of B to be 5 because a loop is 2. It comes in and go back same place, so it's 2. So we say in this directed multigraph, the multiplicity of AB is 1, and the multiplicity of BC is 2. So now we can go through some of the graph models. Again, our main first part of the session is to understand what is a graph. Again, graph consists of 2 things: the vertices or the node and the edges. Edge is a line that connects 2 or more vertices together. We can have a directed and undirected, or we can have a pseudo graph also, which means a graph with multi edges, and also it has a loop. So again, that's the basic definition of a graph. Next, we go through graph models. So we can use, especially in computer science field, we can use graph to represent so many applications. So the first application here is computer network. So I can have a computer network system in US, and here we have different cities: San Francisco, Los Angeles, Denver, Chicago, Detroit, Washington, and New York. Now, which we're going to say here that the vertex represent the city, and the edges represent the communication line or connecting line from one computer center in one city to another computer center in another city. So this would be a very good example of graphic models. So here we say when we build a graph model, we use the appropriate type of graphs to capture the important feature of the application. And here we're going to illustrate this process using graph models of different types of computer network. In all these graph models, the vertices again represent the data center. So we have a data center in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Denver, etc. Each vertex represents the data center of the city. And then the edge will represent the communication links, or I'll say the connecting links. So here we say to model computer network, where we are only concerning whether 2 data centers are connected by communication link. All we need to do is use a simple graph, because this is the appropriate type of graph when we only care whether 2 data centers are directly linked, not how many links there are, for example, pseudocode, if we have loops, etc. No, we just care about how they are connected. So this will be a simple undirected graph. So we continue with the computer network models. Here we say to model a computer network where we care about the number of links between the data center, we're going to use the multigraph. The multigraph here, we can see that Los Angeles, we have 2 connections to Denver. From Denver to Chicago, we have 2 connections, also actually 3. Now, to model a computer network with diagnostic links at data center, we can use the pseudocode graph as a loops are connected. So we can see that in each city or in each data center, we have loops connected. So it becomes again a pseudograph. Now, to model a network with multiple one-way links, we can use directed multigraph. Also know that we could use the directed multigraph without multiple edges if we only care whether there's at least one link from data center to another data center. And we can see this again, directed multigraph. First arrow showing you we move from Chicago to Denver, another Chicago to Denver, another Denver to Chicago, Denver to Chicago. So graph terminology in summarize, here we say that to understand the structure of a graph and also to build a graph model, we are going to ask ourselves a few questions below. First question is, are the edges of the graph undirected or directed, or both? Are the edges of the graph is directed or undirected? Now, if the edges are undirected, are multiple edges present that connect the same pair of vertices? Then this is where we have the multi-way. Okay, so if the edges are undirected, are multiple edges present that connect the same pair of vertices? Next, if the edges are directed, are multiple directed edge present? Also, we want to know if there's any loops. So those are the example. If I have a simple graph, it means the edges are undirected when we don't allow multiple edges, and we also don't allow a loop. In the second, if we have a multi-graph and it's undirected, since it's a multi-graph, we may have a multiple edges, which is allowed, yes. But the loops allow no. Next, we go to the pseudograph. It's undirected. Multiple edges allowed, yes. Loops allowed, yes. Then we have a simple directed graph. This is a directed graph. Is it multiple edges allowed? No, because it's simple directed graph. Now, directed multigraph, the multiple edge is allowed, which is yes. And also the loop will be allowed. So these are all the applications of graphs. Here we say we will illustrate how graph theory can be used in models, especially social networks like Facebook, data how to friend somebody online. And the friend group can be a graph by itself. They have some few similarity in terms of a person's attributes or characteristics, maybe same last name or same city they were born, etc. We can form a graph groups. We also have a communication network, information network. We also have information network. We have a software, design, transportation network, biological networks. So these are all different types of applications. I'll say computer applications that use graphs. The biological network, in this case, we can use a computer application. Example is the computational biology to build a network of other proteins, how they interact with each other, or the genes, how they interact with each other. So here also we said that it's a challenge to find a subject to which a graph theory has not yet been applied, especially in terms of computer applications. That's why earlier stage we said that graph is one of the most important data structure in computer science. And data structure means how data is organized in our computer system, or it can be application. So we start with the social network, an example of a graph model. Here we say graphs can be used to model social structures based on different kinds of relationship between the people or groups. So in a social network, the vectors will represent individuals or the organizations, and the edges represent the relationship between them. So the next, we say that again, in social network, vertices represent individuals or organization, and the edges represent relationship between them. Now, the useful graph model for social network can include friendship graphs. This is common in Facebooks. Most of the time, your Facebook friends may come from the same city with you, or maybe something common, maybe the same profession. Then we also have a collaboration graphs, which is normally undirected graphs where two people are connected if they collaborate in a specific way. Then we also have the influence graphs. This will be a directed graph where there's an edge from one person to another if the person can influence the second person. Well, normally in something like Instagram, the media, we have influencer. So influencer, most of the time they are celebrities. We have regular citizens following them, and the same concept here. So graph again is used a lot in social network. So influence graphs normally one person follow another person. So directed graph where there is an edge from one person to another if the person can influence the second person. Then collaboration graph, undirected graphs where two people are connected if they collaborate in a specific way. So this example of a social network, you can see example here is about Facebook friends in one group, which is can see in a graph. So we have Paula, Amy, Todd, Steve, Gally. You can see how they are connected as one graph. An influence graph, we may have Deborah. Influence goes through Linda, Brian, and also we have Fred. So at this point, we have Brian, and Deborah influenced Brian, Brian, Hoovin, etc. So an example of a collaboration graphs, also we can use the Hollywood graph model. So the Hollywood graph model is the collaboration of factors in films. And here we can represent actors by vertices, and we connect two vertices if the actors they represent have appeared in the same movie. Also, we will study the Hollywood graph in section 10.4 when we discuss Kelvin Bacon numbers. Also, we have the academic collaboration graph, which normally models the collaboration of researchers. This is academic collaboration. So monitor the collaboration of researchers who have jointly written a paper in a particular subject. Here we can represent researchers in a particular academic discipline using vertices. Also, we can connect the vertices representing two researchers in this discipline if they are co-authors of a book. Or we'll study the academic collaboration graph for mathematicians in section 10.4. So again, we're going to study the academic collaboration graph for mathematicians. So next is the application to information network. Here we say graphs can be used to model different types of networks that link different types of information. In a web graph, The web pages are represented by vertices, and the links are represented by direct edges. And also in a web graph, again, web pages are represented by vertices, and the links are represented by directed edges. So a web graph models the web at a particular time. We are going to explain this in, again, section 11.4. Also, we have a citation network where researchers in a particular discipline are represented by vertices. Okay, so when a paper cites a second paper as a reference, then there's an edge from the vertex representing this paper to the vertex representing the second paper. We also have a transportation graph. Here we say graph models are extensively used in the study of transportation network. So airline network can be modeled using directed multigraphs, where the airports will represent the vertices, because that's the location. Then each flight to another location will be the edges. Then at the end, we should also represent the destination. So from the departure to destination airport will be the two vertices. So road networks can be also modeled using graphs, where the vertices represent the intersection and the edges represent the road. We also have the software design application. We can use the graph models for it. Here we say the graph models are extensively used in a software design. We will introduce two such models here, one representing the dependency between the modules of a software application and other representing restrictions in execution of statements in computer programs. And when a top-down approach is used to design software, then we know the system is divided into modules. Each module will perform a specific task. So we go from the highest to the lowest module. Now we use a module dependency graph to represent the dependency between these modules. And these dependencies need to be understood before coding can be done. So in a module dependency graph, vertices represent the software modules. And there's an edge from the one module to another if the second module depends on the first. So here we say we can see a directed graph called precedence graph to represent which statement must have already been executed before we execute each statement. So the vertices here will represent the statement in a computer program. Here we say there is a directed edge from vertex to second vertex if the second vertex cannot be executed before the first. So here, this is a software design application. This means I have to do S1 first before S2. Now, if I don't have no S2, I can't go to S3. Then also a biological application. And this is a nice example here. We can see a raccoon and a hawk. If from raccoon move to hawk, we can say there's some biological relationship between the two. So graph models are used extensively in many areas of biological science. And we will describe two such models, one to ecology and the other to molecular biology. So niche overlap graphs model competition between species in an ecosystem. So what you have is the competition, for example, getting we say vertices represent the species and the edges connect the two species. When they represent species, it compete with food resources. So by looking at this graph, we can see that raccoon and hawk or raccoon and hawk, they compete for food resources together. But raccoon and opossum does not. And also we have a second one. And the second one here for biological application is how proteins interact with each other. So here we have a protein named RRP43 and it interacts with Q9Y3AS. But RRP43 does not interact with RRP46, but it interact with, let me move, interact with RRP41 to RRP40. So here we say protein interaction graphs can be huge and can contain more than 100,000 vertices, which represent 100,000 DNA nucleotide. Each represents a different protein and more than 1,000 edges, which represent an interaction between proteins. So protein interaction graphs are often split into smaller graphs called a module, which represent the interaction between proteins involved in a particular function. So again, this will be the conclusion of our lectures on the starting of graphs and graph model. So this lecture consists of 6 different parts on graphs. So the first part, again, understanding what is a graph and where we can apply graph forms or graph models. So again, wish everybody the best and thank you.